The Two Towers. The Lord of the Rings 2 by J.R.R. Tolkien. The perilous quest begins. The perilous quest begins. Frodo and Sam, burdened with the fate of Middle-earth, stood at the banks of the Anduin, the great river. Its waters flowing deep and true from the misty mountains to the sea. The river's surface shimmered with the light of the setting sun, reflecting the myriad of colors of the twilight sky. They gazed into the distance where the Tower of the Moon, Minas Ithil, now lay in ruins, a haunting relic of a time when it stood as a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. A memory stirred in Frodo's mind, a tale once told by Gandalf of the tower's fall, and its significance as the first stronghold to succumb to the shadow of Mordor. It was here that the ring-wraiths had first emerged, casting a pall over the valley that would come to be known as the Valley of the Wraiths. The valley itself lay ahead, a foreboding expanse of barren land, where the air was thick with the stench of decay and the ground was littered with the remnants of battles long past. The twisted forms of once majestic trees now stood as grotesque sculptures, their branches clawing at the sky in silent agony. "Are you ready, Sam?" Frodo's voice was a mere whisper, a stark contrast to the river's persistent murmur. Sam, steadfast as ever, nodded. "I am, Mr. Frodo. Though the road be fraught with peril, I will follow you to the end." Their journey took them through the marshes, where the air was filled with the croaking of unseen creatures and the squelch of the sodden earth beneath their feet. The ground was treacherous, each step a gamble between solid earth and the grasp of the murky waters. Gollum, with his peculiar affinity for such places, moved ahead with unsettling swiftness, occasionally disappearing from sight, only to reappear when least expected, guiding them through this labyrinth of decay. As the shadows grew longer and the light dimmed, Gollum's form became less distinct, blending into the darkness until, with a swift leap, he vanished entirely, leaving Frodo and Sam to clutch at the fading echoes of his footsteps. The night brought with it a chilling fog that clung to their cloaks and muffled the world around them, turning every whisper of wind into the rustle of pursuit. The Valley of the Wraiths awaited them, a silent testament to the darkness that lay ahead, its very air a shroud of despair. The path wound on, an unending serpent through a land that had forgotten the warmth of the sun, where even the bravest hearts might falter. Honoring Boromir's last wish. The sun's golden rays bathed the land in a warm glow as Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli bid farewell to their fallen comrade Boromir. By the banks of the river they prepared a boat to carry Boromir's body, determined to honor his last wish. "We will send him to the falls of Rauros," Gimli said, his voice steady despite his grief. "The Anduin will guard him, and he will find peace in its waters." With solemn steps they carried Boromir to the boat, laying his sword and shield by his side. Aragorn placed the broken horn of Gondor with him, a testament to his valor. As the boat drifted away, Legolas sang a mournful elvish lament, his voice echoing across the river. Merry and Pippin, rescued by Éomer and the riders of Rohan, watched from a distance, their hearts heavy. "They honor him as he deserved," Pippin whispered to Merry. The hobbits vowed to honor Boromir's memory through their own bravery. Back on the riverbank, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli turned their thoughts to their missing friends. "We must find Merry and Pippin," Aragorn said resolutely. With a newfound sense of purpose, they ventured into the forest, following the trail left by the Uruk-hai captors. As they journeyed, they spoke of Boromir's valor, hoping his sacrifice would not be in vain. Thus they pressed on through the night, their bond strengthened by their shared loss, their mission clear, to rescue their friends and fulfill the final wish of a hero. The looming war. In the golden hall of Edoras, Gandalf's voice was a low murmur, barely audible above the crackling of the hearth. "Darkness approaches from Isengard," he said, his eyes meeting King Theoden's. The enemy grows bold, and their numbers swell. We must stand ready. Theoden nodded, his face grim. We shall not fall easily, he declared. Rohan will answer the call to arms. Outside, the Rohirrim gathered, their faces set with determination. Eomer rallied his riders. To horse, he cried. Let us show these orcs the might of the Rohirrim. Meanwhile, in the shadow of the great fortress of Helm's Deep, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli surveyed the battlements. They will come at dawn, Aragorn said, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. We must hold them until Gandalf returns. Legolas, his keen eyes scanning the horizon, nodded. We will stand firm. Gimli, his axe gleaming in the torchlight, grinned. Let them come. They'll find dwarves are not so easily overrun. As night fell, the defenders took their positions. The air was tense with anticipation. The silence of the dark hours was broken only by the occasional snort of a restless horse or the soft clatter of armor as warriors shifted in their posts. Aragorn found a moment of peace before the storm. He walked the walls, his gaze lingering on the faces of the men and elves who stood with him. This night we fight for our homes, for our families, he spoke softly, yet his voice carried, and for the hope that a new day will bring. The first light of dawn broke the darkness, and with it came the distant sound of marching feet and the guttural cries of the enemy. The battle for Helm's Deep had begun. Arrows flew, and the clang of steel on steel, the beat of blades on shields, and the screams of men filled the air. Theoden rode out, his sword raised high. Ride now, he shouted. Ride for ruin and the world's ending. The Rohirrim charged, meeting the oncoming tide of orcs. The clash of steel rang out as the two forces collided with tremendous force. Sam, caught in the midst of the battle, witnessed swarthy men in red being pursued by green-clad warriors. A fallen man with green arrow feathers sticking from his neck lay nearby. Suddenly, a Mumak of Harad, a huge elephantine creature, crashed out of the trees and careened down the slope towards the deeping wall. Eomer and Aragorn, standing together on the wall, drew their swords, Andril and Guthwine, and charged into battle, shouting their blades' names. They fought fiercely, breaking the shields of the wild men and forcing them to retreat. But as they surveyed the damage to the gates, they saw the gathering forces of orcs and men beyond the stream. Knowing they needed to regroup, they retreated to fortify the gates. The battle raged on, and the defenders of Helm's Deep fought with all their might, knowing the fate of Middle-earth hung in the balance. Dangers in Mordor. Marshes stretched before Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, like a vast, unending puzzle of mist and shadow. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and each step seemed to sink deeper into the mire than the last. We must be careful, Master, Gollum hissed, his eyes darting nervously. The nasty orcs they patrols here. Yes, they does. Frodo nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Lead on, Smeagol. We trust you. Sam, however, scowled from behind, keeping a wary eye on their guide. We goes around, yes, around, Gollum whispered, shivering at the thought of the bad place full of bad memories. They trudged on, the weight of the ring growing heavier around Frodo's neck, a burden that seemed to echo the oppressive atmosphere of Mordor. Don't you worry, Mr. Frodo, Sam replied, his voice firm. We've come this far, and we won't be giving up now. Their journey was fraught with close calls as orc patrols roamed the paths. At one point, Gollum froze, pulling them into the shadows just as a group of orcs marched by, their armor clinking ominously. When night fell, they found shelter in a hollow, away from the enemy's gaze. We should rest here for the night, Frodo suggested, his voice barely above a whisper. Sam nodded, setting down his pack with care. I'll keep watch first, Mr. Frodo. Frodo's eyes fluttered closed, but his mind remained alert, troubled by the ring's relentless whispers. As they settled in for the night, Sam's gaze never left Gollum, his suspicion of their guide growing with every furtive movement. The night passed without incident, but the tension between them remained palpable. With the first light of dawn, they resumed their journey, leaving the Tower of the Moon behind as a distant memory. Gollum, ever cautious, led them away from the main path, pleading, "We can't go that way, not towards the Black Gates. There's a secret way, a safer path that only Smeagol knows." Frodo and Sam exchanged a glance, their uncertainty mirroring the treacherous landscape that surrounded them. The weight of their decision hung heavy in the air, but time was not on their side. The defense of Helm's Deep. The night was heavy with anticipation as the defenders of Helm's Deep braced for the impending assault. The deep gorge, fortified by towering cliffs, offered a formidable natural defense, yet the men and elves within knew a grueling battle awaited. Aragorn, standing sentinel on the battlements, scanned the horizon. "They are coming," he declared, his voice unwavering. At his side, Legolas, the elven archer, peered into the darkness, his keen eyes seeking targets. Below, Gimli the dwarf tested his axes, his stout heart eager for battle. "Let them come," he bellowed. "They'll learn that dwarves are not so easily overcome." The initial charge of the orc army shattered the silence, their war cries echoing through the gorge. Aragorn, a beacon of leadership, shouted commands, urging the Rohirrim to hold their ground. "For Rohan, for your king." His sword Anduril sang through the air, a deadly extension of his will. The defenders fought valiantly, repelling wave after wave of attackers. But the enemy seemed endless, and the relentless assault wore down the resolve of the weary warriors. The night grew darker and a great horn sounded, signaling the arrival of additional foes. Erkenbrand, a stalwart hero of the Rohirrim, shouted words of encouragement. "Look to the wall, hold the shield wall." But despite their efforts, the wall was breached, forcing the defenders to retreat further into the fortress. Aragorn, ever resolute, rallied his companions. "Stand firm, hope remains," he cried, his voice cutting through the despair. Together, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli fought with unwavering determination, their bond unbreakable in the face of adversity. As the battle reached its climax, Saruman's dark sorcery swept across the field, threatening to overwhelm the defenders. Gandalf, his power clashing with Saruman's, channeled the fury of the storm, creating a spectacle of crackling energy. In the end, it was the unity and strength of the defenders that turned the tide. The orcs and wild men faltered, their ranks breaking under the relentless assault of the defenders. As the storm abated, victory belonged to those who had stood against impossible odds. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, battle-weary but triumphant, shared a moment of silent gratitude. Their bond, forged in the crucible of war, would endure forever. As they walked away from the bloodied field, they knew their friendship would last a lifetime. Confronting Saruman. The air was thick with tension as Gandalf, accompanied by King Theoden, stood before the towering walls of Isengard. The once lush gardens were now a desolate ruin, a testament to Saruman's betrayal. High above, Saruman watched, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You have no power here, Gandalf the Grey." Saruman's voice echoed, dripping with scorn. "I am Gandalf the White, and I come to offer you a choice," Gandalf replied, his voice steady and commanding. "Renounce your alliance with Sauron and help us end his reign of terror." Saruman laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that sent shivers down the spines of all who heard it. "And why would I do that? I've seen the power of the ring, and it will be mine." Gandalf sighed, his heart heavy with sorrow. "Sauron does not share power. If you continue down this path, it will lead only to your destruction." Theoden stepped forward, his face etched with concern. "Saruman, think of the people of Rohan, of all the free peoples of Middle-earth. You were once our ally. Do not let your lust for power blind you to the true enemy." But Saruman was unmoved. "My dear Theoden, you are a fool if you think I would ever bow to you again. I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. The dark fire will not avail you." Gimli growled in frustration, his hand gripping the handle of his axe tightly. "Let me at him, Gandalf. I'll make him see reason." Legolas laid a calming hand on the dwarf's shoulder, restraining him. "Patience, Gimli. We must not let anger cloud our judgment." Gandalf raised his staff, and a bright light shone from its tip, illuminating the darkness of Isengard. "Saruman, this is your last chance. Join us, or face the consequences." For a moment, there was silence. Then with a sneer, Saruman turned his back on them. "I need no lessons from you, Gandalf. I have chosen my path, and I will see it to the end." As they turned to leave, a single tear ran down Gandalf's cheek. It was a tear for a friend lost. Betrayal and rescue. As Frodo, Sam, and Gollum journeyed through the treacherous lands of Mordor, they encountered numerous challenges and dangers. Gollum's dual nature caused both aid and mistrust, and Frodo's mercy towards him showcased the conflict between suspicion and compassion. One day, as they traversed a narrow path, Gollum suddenly stopped and sniffed the air. "What's wrong, Smeagol?" Frodo asked, noticing Gollum's unease. Nothing," Gollum muttered, his eyes darting back and forth. Just being careful." Sam exchanged a skeptical glance with Frodo. They had grown wary of Gollum's erratic behavior, but they needed his guidance to reach Mount Doom. As they continued on their way, Gollum's suspicions intensified. He accused Frodo of being wicked and tricksy, claiming that he intended to harm him. Frodo tried to reassure Gollum, but his words fell on deaf ears. "Gollum, listen to me," Frodo said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not going to hurt you. We need each other to get to Mount Doom." But Gollum was beyond reason. His internal struggle had reached a boiling point, and the ring's influence had consumed him. With a snarl, he turned against Frodo and Sam, leading them into Shelob's deadly trap. No, not here," Sam cried out as they stumbled into the dark cavern. "Gollum, what have you done?" In the dim light, they could see the monstrous Shelob looming over them, her many eyes glinting with hunger. Frodo and Sam, though terrified, stood back to back, their resolve as strong as the steel of their blades. "We've come too far to be stopped now," Frodo declared, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. With a battle cry, they charged at Shelob, their fear turning into fierce courage. The fight was long and perilous, but the hobbit's determination proved stronger than the spider's malice. Eventually, they emerged victorious, leaving the creature wounded and retreating into the darkness. As they made their way out of the lair, the weight of their narrow escape hung heavily upon them. Yet they pressed on, the fires of Mount Doom calling them to fulfill their destiny. The final push. The final push. The air was thick with the stench of Mordor, a land that had never felt the touch of the sun. Samwise Gamgee, with the weight of the One Ring around his neck, trudged through the barren wasteland, his heart heavy with the thought of Frodo, captured by the enemy. The ring, a burden once borne by his dearest friend, now hung as a testament to the promise he had made, to see this quest through to its bitter end. Sam's mind raced with memories of their journey, the friends they had made, and the perils they had overcome. But it was the image of Frodo, pale and lifeless in the clutches of the giant spider Shelob, that spurred him forward. He had thought Frodo dead, and in a moment of despair had taken the ring, only to discover that Frodo lived, held captive in the tower of Cirith Ungol. As he approached the dark tower, he overheard two orcs in conversation, their coarse voices carrying through the air. "Did you hear about the little one they found?" grunted one of the orcs, his armor clinking with each movement. "Aye, Snaga, I heard. They say it's one of the spies from the Shire," replied the other, a larger orc with a scar across his face. Sam pressed himself against the cold stone, listening intently. The boss wants him alive, says he's got something valuable. But between you and me, I wouldn't mind having a bit of fun with him first. The larger orc sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. But Sam was resolute, his resolve as firm as the steel of his blade. With a swift motion, he struck, his sword finding its mark. The orcs fell, one by one, until silence reigned once more. Sam then turned to Frodo, his hands working quickly to free him from his bonds. "We're not done yet, Mr. Frodo," he said, determination in his voice. "But we're closer now, closer to the end of this dark road." And with that, they set off, their spirits lifted by the bond of their unyielding friendship, ready to face whatever lay ahead in the shadows of Mount Doom.